You think you know everything about a celebrity split until the person closest to it opens her mouth and the entire internet freezes. That is exactly what happened when Jelly Roll's 18-year-old daughter, Bailey Ann Difford, stepped onto a TikTok live and made it very clear that everything people believe about her father's divorce from Bunnie XO is wrong. Not slightly off. Completely wrong. She did not spell out the truth, but she promised it was coming. And what she said in the meantime shook fans harder than the divorce announcement itself. This is the story no one has fully told yet, and the details behind it reveal just how little.
And during that, he was so mad and we were so emotional that he ended up doing exactly what I told him to do and filing the divorce papers. Was I blindsided, and was this divorce mutual?
The public actually knows about a split that has captivated millions. The man behind the music, who Jelly Roll really is. Before anyone can fully understand why this divorce is rocking the entertainment world the way it is, a quick look at the man at the center of all of it paints a picture that makes the whole story land differently. Jason Bradley Difford was born on December 4, 1984, in Antioch, Tennessee, a neighborhood in Nashville that had earned a reputation for being rough around the edges. His mother struggled with mental illness and addiction, while his father worked as a meat salesman and ran a side operation as a bookie. Growing up in that environment did not set him up for an easy road. By the time he was a teenager, he was on the streets dealing substances, and his legal troubles began before he ever had a chance to finish high school. He was baptized at 14 years old, but that same year he was also arrested, and what followed was a decade-long cycle of incarceration that would define the early chapters of his life. The charges were serious: aggravated robbery, substance possession, repeat offenses that kept cycling him back through the prison system across his teens and into his 20s. He did not graduate high school, but eventually earned his GED at 23, a detail he has shared openly as part of the larger narrative of a man who had to build everything from scratch on a foundation that gave him almost nothing to work with. The remarkable thing is not that he made it despite all of that. The remarkable thing is what he built once he decided to. It was behind bars that Jelly Roll first discovered his voice for music. He started rapping and writing during his time in prison, pulling from influences like 3-6 Mafia, UGK, and 8 Ball and MJG, acts whose southern hip-hop sound shaped his earliest material. After his release, he started selling mixtapes out of the trunk of his car, building a fan base one listener at a time through hustle and authenticity rather than radio play or label support. His music spoke directly to people who had lived hard lives, because he had lived one himself, and that honesty created a connection that no marketing campaign could manufacture. Collaborations with underground artists like Lil White and Haystack came during those early independent years, as he steadily built the kind of grassroots following that did not need a label's permission to grow. The real breakthrough came much later. In 2021, he released Son of a Sinner, a track that crossed from hip-hop into country and changed everything. The song soared up the charts and introduced him to an audience far larger than anything his underground career had reached. 2 years later, he was named New Artist of the Year at the 2023 Country Music Association Awards, a recognition that told the whole of Nashville that this tattooed, formerly incarcerated rapper from Antioch was not just passing through. He was there to stay. By the time the 2026 Grammy Awards arrived, Jelly Roll walked away with wins including Best Contemporary Country Album, delivering an emotional acceptance speech that left few eyes dry in the room. He opened by calling out to Jesus Christ, crediting his faith, and then immediately turned to thank Bunnie for saving his life. His story has always been one of redemption, of a man who came from the lowest possible starting point and somehow through sheer persistence and music that refused to hide from pain, made it to the very top of an industry that had every reason not to accept him. Fans did not just like his songs, they saw themselves in them. His net worth, estimated at approximately $20 million as of early 2026, reflects the extraordinary scale of a journey that started with mixtapes sold from a car and ended at the Grammy stage. And that deep emotional investment in his story is exactly why the divorce from Bunnie XO hit so many people like a punch to the chest. This was supposed to be the couple that proved love could survive anything. What no one expected was that the person who would shake the narrative most fiercely would not be Jelly Roll himself, nor Bunnie, but an 18-year-old who grew up watching both of them and has had enough of everyone else's opinions about something she lived through firsthand. A love story that started in Vegas. To understand what made this divorce feel so devastating to fans, it helps to understand just how much Jelly Roll and Bunnie XO seemed like the real thing. The two first met in 2015 at one of his concerts on Fremont Street in Las Vegas. Bunnie, whose real name is Alyssa DeFord, was not a random fan in the crowd. She had built her own identity through her candid platform and had a life history she never tried to hide. She had previously worked as an escort and in the adult entertainment industry, a past she spoke about openly, unapologetically, and with a confidence that most public figures would never dare to match. She later retired from adult entertainment industry in 2023, but she never treated her history as something to be ashamed of. And that unapologetic honesty became one of the most recognizable qualities of her public persona. When she and Jelly Roll connected, neither of them pretended to be anyone they were not, and that mutual honesty became the foundation of everything they built together. They married on August 31st, 2016, in a small ceremony at the Stained Glass Wedding Chapel in Las Vegas. It was a private moment for two people who had both seen the darker sides of life and found in each other something steady and real. 7 years later, in 2023, they returned to that same chapel to renew their vows, a gesture that at the time read as a full-circle commitment to everything they had been through and survived together. Fans found that moment deeply romantic. It felt like confirmation that what these two people had was not a celebrity relationship built for cameras. It was something genuine. One of the most talked about chapters of their relationship was the custody battle Jelly Roll faced over his daughter, Bailey Ann, who was born on May 22, 2008. Jelly Roll has spoken openly about the fact that on the day his daughter was born, he was in prison for substance dealing. By the time Bunnie came into his life, he was in a legal fight to gain primary custody of Bailey, and Bunnie stepped up without hesitation. He has recalled sitting her down and telling her about the situation, and her response was immediate. No matter what happened between the two of them romantically, she would help him get that little girl. They gained primary custody of Bailey in 2017, and from that point forward, Bunnie became the central maternal figure in Bailey's life, despite not being her biological mother. That bond between stepdaughter and stepmother became one of the most genuinely moving parts of the DeFord family story, and it is central to why Bailey's public response to the divorce carries the emotional weight that it does. Jelly Roll also has a son, Noah Buddy DeFord, born August 23, 2016, from a previous relationship with Melissa Ann Cowell. Jelly Roll and Bunnie share no biological children together, though they spent years trying to change that. Beginning in 2019, they started a fertility journey that became increasingly public. In June 2024, Jelly Roll appeared on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast and revealed for the first time that the couple had been pursuing IVF. Bunnie posted the clip on Instagram with the caption, "God willing, baby DeFord 2026, turning their private hope into something they chose to share because, as she explained, they had always been transparent with the people who followed their lives. They discussed the possibility of twins, eventually settled on using a surrogate, because Bunnie said carrying a pregnancy herself carried too much medical risk. and documented the emotional roller coaster of that process with the same openness they had applied to every other chapter of their lives. By November 2025, Bunnie was still speaking on her podcast about putting the IVF journey in God's hands and staying open to adoption if needed. As recently as February 2026, she wrote in her memoir, Stripped Down, Unfiltered, and Unapologetic, about trying to have twins via surrogate. It was a couple who had not given up on the idea of a shared future. And then, within months, the marriage itself was over. When the silence broke, the divorce no one saw coming. For a couple who had been so publicly open about the hard things in their relationship, the silence leading up to the divorce announcement was jarring. The last time Jelly Roll and Bunnie were seen together publicly was at the 2026 Grammy Awards in February, where he won Best Contemporary Country Album and delivered a tearful acceptance speech that opened with a direct shout-out to Jesus Christ before crediting Bunnie for saving his life. It felt like a high point. Within months, the marriage was over. Court records confirmed that Jelly Roll filed for divorce on May 18, 2026, in Williamson County, Tennessee. He cited irreconcilable differences and listed the date of separation as May 9th, noting in the filing that the two were unable to live together successfully as husband and wife. He proposed an equitable division of their shared assets and debts. The filing was quiet, handled without press releases or public statements, but court records are public documents, and once reporters accessed them, the story exploded. Before the news became official, fans had already begun picking up on signals that something was wrong. Bunnie had been sharing a series of cryptic posts on social media in the weeks prior. She reposted content about women's intuition and things that do not add up. She shared a quote about emotional immaturity and spiritual unawareness. She shared another piece about her trash exes. And just hours before the divorce news went public, she posted a photo of herself in a satin bralette and matching thong with the caption, "She's getting her sparkle back." A line that, in hindsight, reads like a woman reclaiming herself after something painful. A moving truck was later spotted outside their shared Tennessee home, adding another visible signal to a situation that was clearly in motion long before the public knew about it. Bunnie eventually addressed the situation on her Dumb Blonde podcast, where she revealed that the breaking point had come on Mother's Day 2026, following what she described as more than a year of poor communication between them. She said she had told Jelly Roll to file the divorce papers during that argument and later expressed regret about saying it in anger. However, the decision ultimately stood. She made clear that neither of them had been unfaithful, a point Jelly Roll echoed during a concert performance on June 18th in Saratoga Springs, New York, where he told fans directly that nobody cheated on nobody, called Bunnie his best friend, and said she would probably be the only woman he would ever love the way he loved her. He thanked her for the 10 years and promised her another 10 of friendship beyond that. The divorce was finalized in July 2026, approximately 2 months after the initial filing. The settlement was notable for several reasons. It included a confidential lump sum payment from Jelly Roll to Bunnie, a division of major assets, including homes, vehicles, an aircraft, and various intellectual properties, and a strict mutual non-disparagement clause preventing either party from speaking negatively about the other publicly. Bunnie separately revealed that Jelly Roll had agreed to give her the 3-house compound they had been building together as part of the settlement, calling the gesture deeply generous. She also stated that despite ending the marriage, she and Jelly Roll still planned to pursue having a child together through their ongoing surrogacy and IVF process, one of the more surprising details of an already complicated situation. The theories that took over the internet. When two of country music's most beloved figures announce a divorce with minimal explanation, the internet does not wait patiently for answers. It creates its own. The most widely circulated theory, sourced from unnamed insiders who spoke to the Daily Mail and subsequently reported across outlets, including Page 6, pointed toward Jelly Roll's increasingly public Christian faith as the central conflict in the marriage. One insider was quoted describing the situation as one where he was preaching a Christian way of life, while Bunnie's public brand remained explicitly adult-oriented through her podcast content and social media presence. The source framed this as an image clash that had become professionally unmanageable in Nashville, where Jelly Roll's musical identity was increasingly tied to faith-based themes, and his Grammy speech had put his Christianity front and center in a way that invited both celebration and mockery. The same source described insiders in Nashville talking openly about the tension. A second source offered a more cynical angle, suggesting that the renewed faith was not entirely sincere and that Jelly Roll had recognized the significant financial opportunity that exists in the Christian music market, asking Bunnie to adjust her persona to match. Neither source was identified by name, and neither Jelly Roll nor Bunnie confirmed any element of the faith-based narrative. Notably, the theory has an obvious flaw. Jelly Roll knew exactly who Bunnie was when he married her in 2016 and again when they renewed their vows in 2023. Her identity did not change. The question of why a lifestyle that was acceptable before would suddenly become a breaking point years into the marriage requires either a dramatic and sudden shift in his values or a simpler explanation that has not yet been stated publicly. Then, there is the acknowledged history of infidelity. In October 2025, Jelly Roll appeared on the Human School podcast and said directly that one of the worst moments of his adulthood was having an affair on his wife. He described the extensive work both of them had done to repair the relationship and said they had come out stronger for it. Bunnie's memoir, Stripped Down, Unfiltered and Unapologetic, released in February 2026, addressed the infidelity as well, describing the pain of discovering it and the road back. Both parties maintained consistently that this past infidelity was not a factor in the 2026 divorce, and Jelly Roll told concert crowds directly that no cheating was involved in the current split. Bailey Ann confirmed the same from her position inside the family. What actually caused the separation between May 9th and May 18th, 2026, remains publicly unknown. Bunnie's description of a Mother's Day argument following more than a year of communication breakdown gives some context, but the specific trigger that turned a struggling marriage into a filed divorce has not been fully explained by anyone who was actually in the room. And it is precisely that gap, the space between what the public has been told and what those closest to the situation actually know, that Bailey Ann walked directly into when she decided she was done staying quiet. Bailey Ann steps into the fire. Bailey Ann Defford is 18 years old, a recent high school graduate, and the biological daughter of Jelly Roll from his previous relationship with Felicia Beckwith. She has grown up in the public eye gradually, appearing at her father's concerts, accompanying the family to award shows, and maintaining her own TikTok presence. She shares a close bond with both her father and Bunnie, and unlike the divorce proceedings themselves, she has made no attempt to perform neutrality about how people are talking about her family online. When the divorce news broke in June 2026, Bailey was among the first family members to respond publicly. She posted on TikTok, sharing a photo of herself in bed and writing over it that she was disgusted at how invested everyone was in a very clearly private family matter. She described the public's fixation as crazy and promised she was not speaking on it yet. That final word landed heavily. It implied she had something to say. It suggested that when she was ready, the picture would shift. And then, for weeks, the internet waited. On Sunday, July 19th, 2026, Bailey went live on TikTok and delivered something closer to an answer than anyone had offered before, though still not a full one. She was not performing composure for an audience. She was visibly frustrated, and the language she used reflected exactly how done she was with the public conversation surrounding her family. She told viewers directly not to come for her father's name. She demanded people stay out of her DMs, out of her comments, and out of her live. She said she did not want to talk about it. And then she said the line that stopped everything. She told her viewers that they had no idea what had happened, and she told them to wait until they found out. She promised that the public's understanding of not just the divorce, but the entire relationship would crumble the moment she opened her mouth. She said no one else had lived in it. She said it was not a difference of opinions. She backed up both her father and Bunnie on the infidelity question, confirming that no cheating had occurred. And then she repeated her warning. Just wait. TMZ confirmed the details of that TikTok live, noting that Bailey had graduated from high school just months earlier and was navigating all of this at an age when most young adults are focused on other things entirely. The outlet noted that while she is not Bunnie's biological daughter, the two have a very close relationship built over nearly a decade of shared family life. Bailey's directness was not that of someone performing outrage for clicks. It was that of someone who watched strangers turn a deeply personal situation into entertainment and has decided, on her own timeline, that the record is going to be set straight. What that reveal contains is entirely unknown at this point. Whether it concerns the real reason the marriage ended, something about the narrative both Jelly Roll and Bunnie have presented publicly, or some element of the family story that has not been part of any reporting so far, cannot be determined from anything Bailey has said. The non-disparagement clause in the divorce settlement binds Jelly Roll and Bunnie. It does not bind Bailey Ann. That distinction may be the most significant legal detail in this entire story when the time comes. What this means for everyone involved. The divorce of Jelly Roll and Bunnie X carries weight that extends far beyond the personal and into the professional, the cultural, and the emotional lives of the millions of people who invested in their story. For Jelly Roll, this moment arrives at the absolute height of his professional career. His mainstream visibility has never been greater, and the redeeming arc of his life story has become inseparable from the music he makes and the audience that receives it. That audience connected to him because he never pretended to have it all figured out. He built his career on radical transparency about failure, addiction, incarceration, and survival. The divorce, no matter what truly caused it, is now part of that story. How he handles it, whether he retreats into careful public relations management or eventually speaks with the same honesty that built him, will matter deeply to people who have treated his story as their own. For Bunnie, the road forward involves reclaiming an identity that was always hers, but has spent the past decade attached to someone else's arc. Her Dumb Blonde podcast built a substantial audience on its own terms, and her willingness to address difficult subjects without filtering herself has always been a defining quality of her public presence. The cryptic posts leading up to the news, the lingerie photo, the phrase about getting her sparkle back, these do not read like a woman in collapse. They read like a woman who has decided who she is without a marriage certificate, attaching her to another person's story. The compound she is keeping, the financial support, the continuing IVF plans, all of it suggests clarity of direction rather than chaos. For Bailey Ann, the situation carries its own particular weight. She grew up watching these two people build something together, helped shape the family that Bunnie stepped into, and Jelly Roll fought to hold together, and is now sitting on information that she says will fundamentally change how the public understands the whole story. At 18, most people are figuring out who they are. She is also deciding what responsibility she has to a truth that belongs to her family, but has become consumed by public interest. The non-disparagement clause creates a legal structure around what Jelly Roll and Bunnie can say. The stated friendship between them creates a personal one around cruelty. What Bailey Ann does next sits outside both of those structures. She made a promise on that TikTok live that when she opens her mouth, the internet will crumble. Whether that is the frustration of a teenager tired of watching strangers dissect her family, or whether it is a genuine warning about something that has not yet been reported, no one outside the Dayford household can say for certain. What this story ultimately reflects, beyond any of its specific details, is the distance between public narrative and private reality in the age of celebrity transparency. Jelly Roll and Bunnie X built a following on openness. They shared the IVF journey, the vow renewal, the custody fights, the admission of infidelity, and the work that followed, the Grammy gratitude, and the faith declarations. They invited people in, and people accepted that invitation wholeheartedly. Now, those same people feel entitled to explanations, and the family is discovering that transparency, once extended, creates expectations that do not simply dissolve because the people involved want privacy. Bailey Ann's anger on that TikTok live was not just about her father's divorce, it was about the entire bargain that comes with growing up inside a public family and what it costs when the public decides it owns part of the story. There is also something to be said about what this split reveals regarding the weight celebrities carry when they build their identity around vulnerability. Jelly Roll did not just make music. He made a case study in recovery, in the idea that a person's worst choices do not define the whole of who they are. When his marriage ends, that argument does not collapse, but it does become more complicated, because the love story was part of the redemption narrative. Bunnie was not a minor character in his story. She was credited by Jelly Roll himself on a Grammy stage in front of millions with saving his life. Removing her from that story requires rebuilding part of the foundation, and how an artist of his stature does that publicly will be watched very closely by the same audience that embraced him, precisely because he seemed like someone who would never pretend. For the fans who have followed this family closely, the most disorienting element of the entire situation may be the one that Bailey Ann introduced without fully explaining. The idea that the public narrative of this divorce is fundamentally incorrect, that the real reason it happened would change everything people think they know, creates a kind of suspense that no official statement has yet resolved. Both Jelly Roll and Bunnie have spoken carefully. Both have praised each other. Both have denied infidelity. Both have signed a legal document agreeing not to say anything negative about the other. None of that tells the story that Bailey says is waiting to be told. The question of when and whether she tells it remains open. She is 18 years old. She has a life ahead of her that extends far beyond this moment, and she may ultimately decide that the truth she is holding belongs to her family and not to the public that wants it. Or she may decide that letting a false narrative stand indefinitely is worse than speaking on her own terms and in her own time. Either choice carries consequences, and the weight of that decision is not a small one for someone at the start of adulthood who is simultaneously grieving the structure of a family that shaped her entire childhood. What can be said with certainty is that the story of this divorce is not finished. The finalized settlement resolved legal questions. It did not resolve human ones. And as long as Bailey Ann's promise hangs in the air, the Deford family story has an unwritten chapter that its most outspoken member has already promised will change everything. The story of Jelly Roll and Bunnie XO is not a story of reconciliation or redemption. It's a story of two immensely talented individuals who created something extraordinary together, navigated pain, betrayal, and healing within it, and ultimately could not hold it together beyond a decade. Bailey Ann is finally speaking part of that story with a raw honesty that has been absent from every official statement, and what she has not yet said feels like the most important part of all. The music remains timeless, powerful, and transcendent. And perhaps that's the real legacy, not the divorce filings or the cryptic Instagram posts or the internet debates, but the story that continues to move millions of people around the world. In the end, the music is what matters, and Bailey Ann, Jelly Roll, and Bunnie XO together and apart remind us that the most powerful stories are the ones still being lived. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.